Welcome to Rewitched, a charmed 1998 rewatch podcast. Join us on our journey as we recap, examine, and critique the series episode by episode from the beginning.
We'll be keeping our podcast spoiler free, so we welcome fans new and old to join us in watching and reflecting on one of our favorite shows. Currently, we're on season 2,
I'm your host, Jess Sabanko.
and I'm your host, Mia Sabenko.
Now let's get into this week's episode.
This week, we're discussing Season 2, Episode 4, The Devil's Music. It originally aired on October 21st, 1999, and had 5.32 million viewers, over a million less than the previous episode.
And that's sad to me because last episode was a good episode. Why did people stop watching after last episode?
I know, I was thinking the same thing when I didn't know that until I just said it, but that was what came in my mind too. That's so sad.
And I think this is another good one. I think season 2 is already off to a hot streak with these first 4 episodes. So.
Right? I have to say the same thing. And I just want to point out I have there's so many moments in this episode that I just absolutely love. For some reason the power of women in this episode really stood out to me. And I guess I'll explain when we get to that, but also the Darryl and Prue of this episode, magical.
Yes.
I
loved Darryl in this episode.
Loved it.
I was just gonna say, I've never thought of myself as having a crush on Darryl before, but after this episode, I'm like, yo.
And this is even the episode, or an episode where I could see what you were talking about, if the times were different, would Prue and Darryl end up together? Because in this episode, with their chemistry, I could totally see it happening.
Yeah, me too. So we open up the episode and we're at P3 and the place is very dead. There are maybe 10 people in the whole club and 2 people are about to leave. And then we see Prue and Phoebe are sitting together at a table and they're talking about this offer that Prue received from a guy named Chris Barker, who they can get a loan from. And Phoebe says, well, when do we tell Piper? And she says, not until the club is in the black. That's when Piper comes up to them and she asks if they like the name of the club, which is P3, a little nod to the power of 3 to us partners. And Phoebe says that it's very clever. And then she points out that the club is a little bit quiet. And Piper's like, it'll pick up once word of mouth kicks in. And Phoebe's kind of like, well, when would that be? And, Piper's like, well, it takes time. It's not like the loan is going to get called back and we're going to lose the house. And Piper leaves. And then Phoebe's kind of like to Prue, are we going to lose the house? And Prue's like, no, we're going to take that loan. And then we're going to trust Piper to pack the place with people. And Phoebe's like, what people? Where is everybody?
I don't have too much to say. It's just it's a good little intro. It's dead as hell in there. I love the name P3 for the club. I think that was so clever.
Me too. And I know in last episode I wrote it in my notes because we already saw the sign, but I like that we get the little background information on why Piper named it P3, and I think it's a really cute name.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
And the worry about the place not getting off to the start they want it to makes sense because it is hard to start a business, so I like that they're kind of bringing that bit of reality into it.
Mm-hmm. Especially bars and clubs, even now they're a really hard business to maintain,
Yeah,
because a lot of them go under really quickly.
Yeah, because so much of it kind of depends on either A, having some type of event or something that's going to draw people in, or B, already having regulars who are coming all the time.
Exactly. And this was 90s, early 2000s was when the club scene was really big. I feel at a peak.
Yeah, no, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of the ones I've listened to is a bunch of people who worked at nightlife in New York City in the late 90s to the mid 2000s, and how much that has kind of changed in the last few years. A lot of them left New York City to go start clubs in Vegas because of the way New York City has changed since then. But this is kind of the height of big city club life is this time period.
Yeah, so and it still wasn't even that easy to maintain something like this. And it's only gotten worse from there, harder.
Yeah, definitely.
But good luck to Piper.
Yes.
So now we are outside this other club, which is called the Butterflies Cocoon, and a line of people are standing outside it. You could see that it's very packed right now, and that Dishwalla is playing tonight. And then inside the club, we see the band playing, and Leo is walking through the crowd. Our boy Leo is back. And in the back room, we see a girl in her like early 20s going into a room back there with a guy, and he tells her he's the band's new manager, and she's excited and saying how she can't believe he picked her. And he said, well, you seemed like a good soul, plus you said the magic words. You said you'd do anything, remember? And he tells her to wait inside and the band will be down any minute. And he opens another door and closes it behind her, and then we see the girl inside the room looking around, asking if someone is there. And outside the door, the manager says, hurry up, damn it, like whispers it to himself. And then we see her turn around and see something in the room, and she screams. And then back on the stage, we see the band is still playing and no one can hear her screaming. And then the manager opens the door and goes into the room and sees the girl is gone. And he says, okay, that's it, no more, I can't keep doing this, it's gotta stop. And then a figure appears out of the wall and in a demonic-y voice says, we have a pact, you get what you want and I get what I want. And we hear screams, and like inside his chest, it's like almost transparent, and you can see heads of like people inside of him moving around. Really gross looking. Good CGI though. And then the manager just looks super disturbed looking at this.
Yes. So, I mean, obviously, we get the idea that something is going on with this band manager and this demon, and Leo must have some knowledge of it, and that's probably why he's at this club right now.
And I can't wait to see how they play kind of the band into Piper's club and her problems that she's having. Also, is this like, so I know Dishwalla is a real band, and I know that you and I have discussed how they do a lot of live music, or had done a lot of live music at that time to kind of spread artists around and make more money off of that. But this one's a little different. Like they kind of have it throughout the whole episode. Like Dishwalla is a theme, you know?
Yeah, I think this, because, this is the first musical act they really have on the show. So I think part of it is that they are not sure how they're going to work the bands into the episodes yet, because I think we'll see later on, not really to get into spoilers, but we usually have the band appear once, usually towards the end of the episode, and play one song, maybe two. But I believe we have 3 or 4 Dishwalla songs in this episode, and they keep coming up over and over again.
Yeah, it's like sponsored by them.
Basically, yes.
Yeah, I think I understand though, because when they make these deals, it's not like they can make every episode about a new band, so it wouldn't have worked. So I guess they were kind of testing the waters in some sort of way, figuring out how they're gonna include them in the episodes.
Yeah, and I think having like such high involvement in this episode makes sense, because again, it is the first band they're having, and it's kind of setting up the club to be successful as a live music venue.
True. Yeah, it makes sense here.
And also, their like manager is involved with the evil of the episode, so that makes it work.
Yeah,
too.
that was cool how they did that.
So then we have the theme, and then afterward, as usual, we play that little like scenes from San Francisco, and while that's playing, we see that a Dishwalla song. It's the Dishwalla song that I actually knew before watching this episode. I think it's their most famous song. But yeah, so we hear that, and I thought that was cute too, because usually it's like random music that plays during those intros. So I liked that it was a song by the band who is featured in the episode. And then it actually ties right into the next scene, where we hear this radio DJ saying that was Dishwalla's Counting Blue Cars, and that they and their manager, Jeff Carlton, are in his studio as guests, and they're going to be announcing all the clubs they're performing at on their tour. And then we see Jeff Carlton walk out of a door into the hall just as Leo is walking in. He asks Leo if he knows where the bathroom is, and Leo says yeah, but instead he takes him to like this little corner, and then he blows like this dust at him, which is a really bad special effect, but we'll just pretend it wasn't.
Yeah, I know. the little ding and like the diamond shape in the air was a bit much to me.
And like it literally just like looked like really bad, like tacked on afterwards CGI. Like, why didn't they just have him actually like blow something at him?
I know, it would have made so much
It
more
would have looked
sense.
so much more realistic. Like it just didn't look right.
Yeah. Also, another thing I wanted to point out real quick, Leo is in this episode and still not in the theme. Like we've watched 4 episodes of season 2 and he's already been in 2 of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And like
This is so weird.
if we think about it, Darryl has been in the same number of season 2 episodes as Leo has, and he's in the theme.
Yeah. So a little confusing to me. But maybe I don't know. Maybe this is it. This is his last appearance in season 2. Who freaking knows?
Yeah, who knows? Not me. I'll just say that after, because like, not that I've never like listened to Dishwalla songs before. I have, like, I know the Counting Blue Cars, but since I watched this episode, I've been listening to Until I Wake Up on repeat. So it definitely inspired me to listen to some of their songs. So it was
It works
in that way.
It definitely works. There's a lot of songs that I've discovered because of this show.
Yeah.
Like the Cranberries. That's how I
Oh,
found
I
out
love
about the
the
Cranberries.
I
And
can't
that's how I
wait till they
started
come on the
listening to
show.
them. Me too. That's how I started listening to them, was because of Charmed. When I first saw it when I was younger, it was like banger. Okay, so now we are at P3, and on a screen it's showing like all of the expenditures for the club, and it shows that they are 24K in debt, and Piper's looking at it and she's like, this is bad. And then the door opens upstairs and Jenny walks in, and she asks what Jenny's doing there, and Jenny's like, am I breaking the law right now, being underage and all? Piper's like, no, we're not open. Actually, I don't know, but what's your point, Jenny? And Jenny asked if she did come when they were open, if Piper would have her arrested. And she's like, I need a ticket to the show. Piper's like, what show? And Jenny's like, it's all over the radio. I have to see them. If I don't, I'll die. So fucking dramatic. And Piper's like really confused as to what she's talking about. And then that's when Jeff Carlton, the manager of Dishwalla, walks in and asks if she's Piper Hallowell. He says, I have to tell you, when I heard about P cubed, it was as if fate had smiled upon me. Piper's like, P3. He's like, whatever. I manage Dishwalla, and I've been looking for the right kind of place. Something small, new, intimate. The boys want to reacquaint themselves with the personal side of performing. They want to connect again. And they kind of talk a little bit more, and he gives her a contract for Dishwalla to play at her club. And then Jenny gets up and she's like, Mr. Carlton, sir, do you think it would be possible for me to meet the band? I'd do almost anything. And he says, be careful what you wish for, sweetheart. And she looks confused, and he just kind of like stares ahead. I love the way they end scenes like that. Like we talked about that, how it just must be so awkward in that moment.
Yeah. I feel like right from the beginning, like Jeff gives off like such creepy vibes. So I don't get how he's not a suspect before this, like before he becomes one. But also, you know, I like this little interaction with Jenny and Piper. I think Jenny, like, she's very much her age in this scene, you know, like, because I remember being like a young teenager and like there's kind of that desire to like be older and do like grown up things, like go see a band at a club and stuff like that. So I totally get where she's coming from. And I just think it's kind of adorable the way she's like, well, like, would you have me arrested?
Yeah, no, I thought Jenny was pretty cute in this scene. I definitely understand where she's coming from here. I mean, we've all been in that position where we want to do those things like older people would, like you said. Yeah, I didn't hate her too much here. And the way she even talks to Jeff, like, Mr. Carlton, sir, kind of adorable.
Yeah. Like she seems like even more of a little girl in these scenes. And I kind of like that. I like that, you know, we see her trying to be more grown up, but she's so clearly still a kid.
Yeah. And like doesn't see that.
Exactly.
Which I feel like is definitely a position we've all been in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. That was pretty much that was such a creep and kind of like a douchebag, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's so weird because we
sleazy.
see him. Yeah, but then we see him talking to this demon like he doesn't want to be doing this to people anymore, and that And like we see him all scared and shit every time he goes around him. But
Because I think he's sleazy. I don't think he's evil, and there's a difference.
yeah, I agree. But still, don't like him that much.
Yeah, no, me either. But he is the bad guy, so makes sense.
Yeah.
So we see this like limo driving, and there's a man inside, and he is on the phone with Prue and talking about the loan. So obviously, this is Chris Barker. And she's talking about how she's kind of nervous about the loan. And he says he's sure he'll see his money once her sister gets the club off the ground. He's kind of like saying that it's no interest, all this stuff. And she's like, no, we'll pay interest. And he says, okay, 0.25%. And then he asks her if she will go to Paris with him for dinner. And she's kind of like, come on. And he's like, dinner in Paris is where it all begins. And she says they should just start out with the loan and then paying him back. And he says she's a hard bargainer. She says, so are you. He says he hasn't even begun to fight, and then asks about Paris again. And she tells him to stop. And he's like, never. I'll see you at the club with the money. And she's like, okay, bye bye. And hangs up.
I hate this guy.
Yeah.
Even from, I mean, we're gonna have more reason later, but even from just the first scene, like, also seems a bit douchey, and I don't like the way that he's kind of pressing Prue. Like, we, as girls, we know what it's like in that moment to, like you don't want to reject them in a mean way, but then they're so pushy and, like, just don't take the hint, and you're like, okay, like, stop, you know?
Yeah, and it's also very clear that the reason he's like offering her this no interest loan is because he wants something else in return for the loan, not the money.
I just found him very gross, and
Yeah, no, he is even sleazier than Jeff Carlton because he's
oh yeah,
more of like a sexually skeezy type of person. Like,
agreed, 100%.
and like you can tell that he's the type of guy who's like just used to, because he has a lot of money, like people do what he wants and stuff.
Yeah, and I hate people like that.
Entitled, I believe, is the word for it.
Oh yeah, if anyone's, he's entitled if I've ever seen it. All right, so now we are in the manor in the kitchen, and Prue walks over to Phoebe and tells her that it's all set with Chris Barker. And Phoebe's like, we're doing the right thing, aren't we? And Prue's like, well, we're helping out our sister. That's always the right thing, right? And then Piper walks in yelling, and she's like, guess what I did? Guess what I did all by myself? Dishwalla, my club, playing there tonight. I networked, I sent out feelers, sent off press releases, and Dishwalla decided to put P3 on their schedule. P3 has officially been validated as the place to be. We are on the map, and I couldn't have done it without you, patient, most generous sisters in the whole wide world, and wraps her arms around them and kisses them on the cheek. She's just all excited. It's such a cute little moment. And then the doorbell rings, and Piper goes to get it and sees it's Leo. And she hugs him, and she's like, this day just keeps getting better. Hi. And he tells her they need to talk, and she asks if he's free tonight. And he's like, better be, because you're my date. We have backstage passes, all access, baby, to see Dishwalla at P3. I made it happen. And he says, no, actually, I made it happen. And then Prue and Piper walk in, and he tells her that there's a demon involved and that he'll be at the club tonight. Says that he cast a spell on Jeff to go see her and book them at the club. Prue asks why he didn't just come to them, and Piper's like, because he knows I would have been pissed off. What are you doing? Leo's like, my job. She's like, your job? What are we, like Leo's witches now? We're supposed to kill a demon during a sold-out concert? And he's like, Piper. She's like, no, anywhere else, Leo, but not there, not my place. And she turns away. She's obviously very upset. And then Leo tells them Jeff made a powerful deal with Maslin, who's the demon, in exchange for human sacrifice. He'll make him rich and powerful by attracting successful bands to them. The band knows nothing about the demon, and Prue asks what happens to all the innocents. And apparently Maslin consumes them for their souls, and the more he collects, the more successful Jeff becomes. And that they need to free the souls and then destroy the demon. And Piper says, all this freeing and destroying, is this between sets or during the encore? And he goes over to Piper and tells her he knows she's upset. And she says, no, like, I'm furious. He's like, we have to talk. She goes, you bet your white letter ass we do. And then he says, later, I have to go. And she rolls her eyes and he orbs out. And Phoebe's like, see, now this is why you should never date a coworker. And like laughs. And she's like, it was just a joke. Prue smiles, but Piper is very clearly annoyed. She's like, how could he do this? Phoebe's like, well, it sounds like he didn't have a choice. And quite frankly, I don't think we do either. And Prue says she needs to go to the office and talk to an investor, but under her breath to Phoebe, she says that it's Barker. And Phoebe nods. So I felt so bad for Piper in this scene.
Yeah, because like we see her all excited in that first part of the scene where she's like, I worked so hard and like this is paying off for me. And then like to have, and I think this is something about like, women wanting to do things for themselves, especially, and then kind of like Leo kind of taking that away from her, even though that's not his intention. Like she wanted this success. She wanted to do everything on her own and prove she could do it and that she didn't need anyone to help her. She just needed them to believe in her.
Mm-hmm.
And like finding out that Leo set this up obviously would feel like a betrayal to her because that takes away everything she was feeling about finally being a success, because this starting her own business and making something that's hers is so important to Piper right now. And Leo has to know that. And I think that's why she's taking all this so hard here.
Yeah, she must have, like, she had to have mentioned it to him before. I mean, we've known for a while how important this is to her. And like you said, like, that's just got to be so disappointing. Like, the biggest betrayal that she's been working so hard and she was looking forward to this, so excited, thinking that she finally did it, just to find out that it was all staged. And on top of that, that he's bringing, like, we know Piper's the one who kind of dislikes being a witch the most. You know what I mean? Not that she doesn't like it, but out of all of them, she's very she wants the normal life. I feel like the most, and I think she also felt like her club was going to be a safe space for that. And the fact that Leo's bringing this demonic stuff and supernatural stuff in her club, I think that really hurt her too.
Yeah. And like the idea that like something going wrong with this can hurt her business, right? Because that's there
Yeah,
too.
exactly. Anyways, I love her attitude towards Leo, and I mean, I like Phoebe's little crack about the not dating coworkers and just Piper's annoyance. Like, it was played out very well, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the chemistry between all four of them and the scene is working really well. And I'm really excited to talk about more of like Piper's kind of like annoyance with Leo and how it keeps coming up throughout the episode.
Yeah, I agree. So this next scene, we're gonna be acting it out.
Yes, I really liked this scene, so I wanted to like go full out in it. Would you like to be Jeff or would you like to be Darryl?
Oh God, I don't know. You choose.
I want to be Darryl.
Okay. Okay.
So we're outside the Butterfly Club and people are bringing in instruments and things. And Darryl is standing to the side with Jeff and he's asking him about one of the missing women, the one we saw the night before. Her name is Tina Hitchens. And Darryl says that she's been missing since last night when she came to this club. And Jeff kind of tells one of the guys that they're going to P3 and that the address is on the front seat. And now we'll get into the scene. So I'm Darryl and Mia is going to be Jeff. You're playing P3, Piper Hallowell's place?
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of time.
Well, you got time for this. And he pulls out a picture of the girl.
I answered your question.
I didn't ask one.
You asked me if I saw Tina whoever.
I don't believe I did. Did you?
What?
See her.
I didn't see anybody, Inspector.
And Darryl tells him to look at the photo again.
Listen, do you have any idea how many girls like that show up to something like this? Hundreds of them, thousands of them, and they all look the same. Short skirts, tight tops, like sexy little peas in a pod. Ew.
So what difference does it make if one of them disappears?
I didn't say that.
You didn't have to.
Why aren't you out hassling her boyfriend?
Did that already. Now I'm hassling you.
I haven't seen her. What's with the Gestapo routine?
It tends to follow the acting like a suspect routine.
Am I under arrest?
Not yet. He pulls out another photo. Melanie Jenkins.
No.
Brittany Tyler.
None of them. Never saw them.
They all disappeared from clubs all around the country. Clubs your band played in. That doesn't concern you?
Not in the slightest. If we're done here, see you around.
And he leaves, and Darryl nods and says, count on it. And then he walks away.
Absolutely love the scene.
Me too. And like, I literally wrote in my notes, I'm like, I'm so attracted to Darryl in this scene. Like, everything about his interaction, I'm just like, whoa, hot.
It's nice to see, like, guys who take things a little more seriously and aren't creepy, I guess. Like, Jeff is so creepy and doesn't care. He makes that little disgusting comment about sexy little peas in a pod and like doesn't really have any concern about these girls. And Darryl's like over here fighting for them, and I really respected that about him.
Yeah, and I remember, like, I feel like I'm seeing a difference in the writing for Darryl's character this season, because I remember last season there were some comments that he was making where I was like, ugh, like, that's misogynistic, but now I'm seeing, like, him defending women, and I'm like, I'm into it. I like it.
Yeah. I think Darryl did so well in this episode, and this scene was amazing. Like, they both played the part so well. Darryl fighting for them and, like, determined to get to the bottom of this. And like I love how they both have something to say. Like he's always got a response to anything Jeff throws at him. It's just so perfect. It works so well.
Yeah, like there's really good pacing and just like interaction in this scene. Like the chemistry is there, the acting is fantastic, and the scene itself, I mean, the writing is strong too.
Yeah. Aside from the acting and everything in this scene, there's not too much else going on except that we know Jeff Carlton, and people are starting to catch on to what's happening here.
Yeah, definitely. We see kind of like the police are picking up on what's going on, so he's not going to stay safe forever.
Exactly. Now we are back at the manor in the attic, and Phoebe and Piper find Maslin in the book, and Piper says, "There's Leo's problem." And Phoebe's like, "It's our problem." And she's like, "You want to know the real problem?" And Phoebe's like, "Oh, do tell." Piper says, "Never mind." She's like, "Thank you." And then Piper asks how to vanquish him, and Phoebe starts to look, and then Piper goes, "And what was with that attitude?" Phoebe's like, "What attitude?" She's like, "Leo, it was like he was angry that I was angry. I have a right to be angry, don't I? I don't want to talk about it." And then Phoebe's like, "Then don't." And they're looking at the book again, and they find out that the souls are tortured and kept alive inside of Maslin. And they realize they need to get close to the manager to get close to Maslin and feed him the potion. Piper says, "Well, I'm already close, and as far as we know, I'm a willing, trusting soul, a sucker, someone who falls for a quick line from a pretty face." And Phoebe's like, "Will you please stop that?" And Piper's like, "You're right, fine, Leo is the least of my worries." And Phoebe says they'll worry about that tomorrow because they need to stop the demon tonight. And Piper's like, "I don't think I can wait that long." Phoebe's like, "Well, you're gonna have to." And that's the end of that scene.
So I really like this scene. I like the way that, Piper's clearly not over what happened with Leo, and she's like, I don't want to talk about it, but keeps talking about it, because I feel like that's exactly what I do when I'm upset. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it, but then I just keep saying things about it anyway. So I related to that.
I'm the same exact way. The way she obsesses about it and thinks about it, and then when you're upset and then you're like, you don't want to keep bugging people about it, but then you remember something else that also doesn't make sense or also was kind of fucked up that happened, and you're like, well, wait a minute, also this, and I'll keep thinking about it and saying stuff, and I'm the exact same way. I'll just obsess about these things.
Yeah, no, same. So hard
it's
to
very
Piper here.
Yeah, very relatable, Piper, in this episode, with all the things that continue on like this.
All right. So then we're at the club and we're in the back room. And Jeff walks in and we see Maslin appear on the wall. And he's like, the cops are asking questions. And you know what? They're not going to catch you. No, sir. They're going to catch me. And he's like, I'm out. And the demon growls. And Jeff continues. He's like, I'm done with it. No more souls. The pact, the agreement is now officially null and void. And then the demon sets him on fire and he's burning and screaming. And then the demon like puts out the flames and Jeff is totally fine, like nothing ever happened. And he's like, you will honor your agreement, Mr. Carlton. Then he gets like super campy and is like, you will bring me more souls. And it's just like too much, but
Yeah, it's a bit much there, but it works, I guess. Okay, so now we are at Buckland's, and Barker is in Prue's office, and he says, "So what you're telling me is that you no longer need a white knight to rescue you and your sisters from debt." Prue's like, "No." He goes, "But we have a deal." She says, "What we had was an agreement to make a deal, and I no longer agree." And he asks if this has to do with Dishwalla playing at P3, and says that hearing about that showed him the club is a diamond in the rough, and so he thinks the club is going to be very successful. So he went to the bank and offered to pick up their loan. And Prue is clearly unhappy. She's like, "You didn't." And he asked to be put on the guest list with a +1 so he can see what he's buying. And Prue's like, "Okay, I am asking you nicely for your own sake. Do not go through with this." He says, "Is that a threat, Miss Hallowell? Be careful. You could be jeopardizing a very profitable relationship." And he asks again for passes and a booth and leaves. So, couple things. Obviously, we're going to get into the fact that he is just such a douchebag in this scene and showed his true colors real quick. But also, is that allowed for someone else to go to your bank and like put a loan through?
I'm pretty sure not, because then anyone could just steal anyone's business at any time and just be like,
It
what?
wouldn't.
I have all this money, so I'm just going to buy their business out from under them. Like, that's not how that works.
That's what I was thinking. Like, it didn't make any sense to me that.
Like, if he was a partner with them, maybe he could do it, but he's not. He's in no way involved.
Yeah, and unless they already like discussed it with their bank, I can't imagine that this
Like, I'm
would be
pretty
like
sure for
possible.
him to do that, his name would have to be on their loan, which it isn't.
Right, right. So yeah, that definitely doesn't make any sense to me at all. But overall, what an asshole, dude. Like if we make another top 10 list, he's definitely going to be up there
Oh, yeah. And
for
like the
worst
whole, like,
guys.
white knight thing, like, okay, this is
Oh,
everything
how he
you have
referred to himself as that.
It's kind of like when guys refer to themselves as a nice guy. Like, the second someone says that, they are not a nice guy.
Yeah, that's pretty much clear as soon as they say that. Like, you're obviously a cocky bastard. Like, referring to yourself as a white knight, like, that was so disgusting to me.
Yeah, I feel like more and more throughout the episode, he's just showing off, like, how entitled he is, how he uses money to get what he wants, and, like, isn't used to taking no for an answer.
Yeah. And, like, still has this confidence. Like, I think a lot of it, too, is, like, he's obviously annoyed because he didn't get Prue, which is what he wanted. Like, he wanted to get Prue, and he knows that he can't win her with the money, and now he's just being an asshole because of it. Like, I feel like a lot of guys handle rejection this way, where they take it out on the girl just because they just happen to not be interested. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I hate that because it's such a common thing to happen.
And it's like one of those things where, like, everyone gets rejected. Like, just move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you don't need to try to destroy someone's life and steal their business just because they won't go to Paris with you.
Exactly. Like, it's disgusting, and it happens so much in real life too, like maybe not to that extreme, but you know what I mean. It's
Like the retaliation of it, yeah.
exactly.
So then we're at the manor and we're in the kitchen, and Piper and Phoebe are making the potion and going over their plan. Phoebe's plan is to put the potion in a balloon to get it down the demon's throat, and she's going to use herself to get close to Jeff and Madeline. Piper thinks it's dangerous, but she says, that Piper and Prue will be there to back her up, so she'll be fine. Piper goes to put something in the blender and is saying, like, I hate him. And Phoebe's like, of course you hate him. He's a demon. Wait, we are talking about the demon, right? He didn't even have the decency to ask me first. I mean, can you believe him? He acted as if we've never even had a relationship before, like it was just business. And then she like turns on the blender without putting the lid on, so Phoebe does it for her. And then Piper continues on. She's like, and I saw the future too, Leo and I get married. A marriage in the future implies some sort of relationship in the present. The question is, where's the relationship? And, Phoebe's like, somewhere between confusing and complicated. Just talk to him, honey. It'll be okay. And Piper says, I'd rather just freeze him and kick him and then the bell rings. And she's like, that better not be him. And as she starts leaving, Phoebe's like, in the shins? And Piper's like, not exactly. So as far as, this little scene, I like the way that, Piper's still stuck on what happened and kind of going off about it still. I like that. I think it's cute. I think it's funny. I like their plan. It seems smart to me. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen next with that.
Pretty much just said everything. Pretty much said it all. I mean, I feel the same way. Definitely comedic, and I can't wait to see what happens with the plan and what happens with Piper and Leo. The way she continues to obsess about this is very, very funny to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we are in the doorway, Piper answering the door, and it's Dan, and he asks if he can talk to her and asks her if she said that Jenny could see Dishwalla because she said that Piper said it was all right. And Piper's like, well, I didn't exactly tell her it wasn't, but things were happening kind of fast. Dan's like, well, she's in her room right now picking out clothes. And Piper's like, oh God, okay, I'll go talk to her. And she opens the door again to go next door. And Leo's standing in the doorway. So now it's Dan, Leo, and Piper. He says that he wanted to talk, but he notices that Dan is standing there. And she goes to introduce them to each other, but Leo already knows who Dan is. And he's like, he used to play second base for the Mariners. He had an all-star season going until he blew out his knee sliding in a home. I still think you were safe. And Dan's like, so do I, and smiles, and Leo introduces himself. Piper is very pissed off about this and says, you follow baseball? You have time to follow baseball, but you don't have time to tell me about you-know-what before you-know-who shows up you-know-where? And Dan starts to say, like, if you guys need to talk, I can leave. And she says they don't need to talk. And then says that Leo stops by occasionally to fix things. Phoebe can show him around. And that's when Phoebe walks in to the, like, entryway. And she says that, and Piper turns to Dan and is like, let's go talk to Jenny. And Dan and Piper leave. And Phoebe says to Leo, she's just a little upset. And he's like, yeah, I don't blame her. Like, I love how Leo is very understanding about this whole thing. Like, you can tell he does feel really bad, but, like, I mean, he did what he had to do. I do understand where Piper's coming from, though.
Yeah. I do
Like, he
think
could have
the,
talked to
like,
her.
kind of way she's acting towards Leo in front of Dan, like, is a little much for me. Like, you could tell she's trying to, like, really bother Leo by being like, oh, like, he's nobody, whatever. Doesn't want, like, Dan to know, like, they have a relationship, basically.
Yeah, super weird to me the way, like, it almost seemed like Piper was pissed off that they were getting along.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why? Like, why do you not want Leo and Dan to know each other? Like, is it because you and Dan have this weird, like, flirty thing that started last episode? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking too. I think the show wants us to see Dan as like a love interest for Piper already. And so they are kind of pushing this like rivalry that doesn't exist between Dan and Leo to be there by making this scene like super awkward and like Piper super unhappy about them interacting.
yeah, it was a little weird. It felt like it was a little too early for that kind of reaction.
Because it would be one thing if like something had actually happened with her and Dan, and then she felt like awkward about him meeting Leo and was like not wanting to be in the situation and like acting weird and like out of character in it. But this just didn't feel earned to me.
Yeah, no, it didn't feel like it warranted like this reaction at all. But it is a good interaction generally. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I did like the way that we learned more about who Dan is in this scene by like Leo knowing, because that felt like it was exposition, but it wasn't like outrageous exposition that just felt added in. Like it felt like conversational. So I liked learning about Dan's past that way.
Yeah, as opposed to last episode where it's like, I'm neighbor Dan, I work in construction, you know?
Exactly.
Definitely much better here.
So then we're at Buckland's, and Prue's walking down the hall, and Darryl approaches her. And he's being a little sassy and saying that Andy didn't teach him all the steps, but asks her if she's going to P3, and that, as usual, he barely knows what's going on and he doesn't like it. Prue says she'll explain everything to him later, and Daryl's kind of like, but you never do. I know it's all about keeping me safe, and I respect that, but what do you know about Jeff Carlton? And she says she can't. He's like, this is about my job. Andy is gone, but I'm not Andy. And I'm not saying you have to tell me about everything, but when you and your sisters get involved, the whole playing field gets a little crazy. She says, yeah, and a lot more dangerous. He says, I'm a cop. Stop protecting me, Prue. And she says, you have absolutely no idea. Then Darryl says, I'm an imaginative guy. I have plenty of ideas. I even had you three working for the CIA for a while. But none of that matters. What matters is that you and I work out some kind of relationship. We're going to need to communicate, or I'm going to become very unsociable. And she agrees. And he asks about the missing girls and Jeff Carlton, and Prue says that they're working on it, and he says that he figured. She asks him to trust them, and he says he does. And so she touches his shoulder, and then she leaves, and he whispers once she's gone, be careful.
I wish that there was a way to read this how it went down, because the body language and the energy was everything in this scene. I felt like even the way Darryl comes up to her with his like, right, and this is where you say Darryl and I say Prue, and like I love his attitude throughout the whole thing. And when she's like okay and agrees to this, like how we need to work out a relationship, how he kind of like calms down and he's like thank God, like what do like please tell me what you know. And she said like we got this one for right now, and the way he trusts her because of Andy and everything. Like this scene was just beautiful to me. I absolutely loved it.
Yes, me too. And like, this is one of those scenes between them where the chemistry is so strong. And I'm just saying, if this show came out now, 10 years ago, something would have happened between Prue and Darryl. If like the network wasn't so against like interracial couples, something would have happened here. I don't know if it would have lasted or if it would have gone anywhere. Like, it might have even been one of those like, we have something and like they kiss once and then realize they're just friends or something, but something would have happened.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. That's what I was talking about when I said that I could see it in this episode because of exactly what you just said. Like it was so perfect. Their chemistry together, Daryl's energy walking in and having this conversation. Like I think this is my favorite scene in the entire episode. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I loved it too.
Absolutely love. We're seeing more involvement from Darryl and how he wants to build this kind of relationship with them. Like it gives me the idea that maybe he will find out about them being witches, and maybe he's gonna be the new, not Andy per se, but like he's obviously building some sort of a relationship with the girls.
Yeah, and it's going to be more like about protecting them from what's going on in the cop world and all that.
Exactly. Like I like that they have him becoming more of a main character. I can't wait to see how it develops with that, like their relationship with him. So now we are in Jenny's room, and Jenny is picking out outfits, and Piper is telling her that the state could shut her down for letting her in. And Dan starts to talk, and Jenny's like, yeah, sure, let's hear from Uncle Dan, who never in his life faked an ID or snuck into a bar, who never did anything wrong ever. And Dan's like, we're talking about you. And she says that Piper said that she could go see the show, and Piper says that she never said that and that she's sorry, but she can't let her in the club. Jenny gets very like angsty about not ever being able to be in charge, and she leaves the room crying, and Dan starts to apologize to Piper, and Piper's like she's just feeling, betrayed, and that like recognizes that Jenny's feeling betrayed, and says she knows the feeling. And then Piper leaves, and Dan seems a little confused.
Yeah, so I feel like the way Jenny's acting here, very her age, I totally get it. I think we've all been there where like we're just like frustrated about not being able to control our lives, especially as a teenager. I feel like that's such a common feeling because you're really getting to that place where you're starting to feel like an adult, but you're not an adult yet. So people are still like kind of able to tell you what to do. And it's difficult. It's like finding that balance within a family is always hard. So I get where she's
Mhm.
coming from with the frustration there.
Yeah, I've definitely been in the same situation, like, or had those same feelings several times as a teenager. Like, I, we've all been there.
So then we're at P3, and Prue and Phoebe are walking through the club. And Phoebe asks if Prue left passes for the investment guy. She's like, no way. The bouncer has his orders. Chris Barker's not allowed in. The last thing we need is for Piper to find out that she's going to lose her club. They stop talking and they change the subject to the demon just as they see Jeff walking in and they start to get into their positions. He walks up to Piper and asks if the band is there, and she tells him they came in the back and shows him where they are. She tells him that everything is ready, and he's like, it better be. I don't want any problems. And then he walks away, and Piper's kind of like, that's too bad. That's when Leo walks up and asks if she's talking to herself, and he's trying to be like flirty and smiley with her. And she's like, what are you doing here? He's like, I'm watching over things. That's what I do, remember? She's like, I remember when it didn't used to be a job. And he tells her it isn't easier for him either. And she says she can't talk about it right now, and she leaves. Then Phoebe and Prue are by the bar, and Phoebe is about to go talk to Jeff. She's like, keep an eye on me. And Prue's like, you're kind of hard to miss in that outfit. And they both laugh. And then she goes over to Jeff and she's like, excuse me, aren't you Jeff Carlton? And at first he seems like he doesn't want to talk, but then he like looks at Phoebe and gets all smiley. And she's like sucking up to him and saying that she saw him on this thing on MTV and that she wants to be a music manager and he's her inspiration. And she starts asking him for pointers and says that she'd do anything to get the inside scoop. And he's like, anything, huh? And then he asks if she wants to meet the band, and he takes her to the back. And Prue and Piper are watching. And then after they walk away, she starts to follow after them. I mean, they start to follow after them.
Okay, so I absolutely love Piper's attitude in this scene. I like the way, I mean, I feel like it's being a bit overplayed with the whole, I mean, I get it, but like Leo's obviously trying here, but it's very realistic and I like seeing her kind of stand up for how she feels. Also, Piper looks so hot.
I'm in love with her hair
Dude.
here.
Oh my, her hair and like makeup, like the dark light, she looks amazing. And she looks hot in that dress too. Like,
Yeah.
we never see Piper looking like that. I was in love with her. Prue and Phoebe, on the other hand, I was not a big fan of their outfits.
I feel like Phoebe's outfit, if it was 1999, I might like it, but like now, no.
Yeah. Like, it was somewhat cute. Cuter than Prue's. I mean, she looks like she's wearing like a grandma's lampshade for pants. You know what I'm saying? Like, have you ever seen like an antique lampshade that looks
Yes.
exactly like that with the jewels and everything? Yeah, I wasn't a big fan.
But I will say I like both of their hair in this scene. Both of their hair looks nice.
Yeah, I agree.
And, you know, as far as I like the way Phoebe's kind of like playing up and being flirty in order to get like Jeff to show her to the Madeline.
Just guys are so easy.
Exactly.
So now they're in the back area and Jeff is like pushing her and locking the doors behind her and pushes her into the room and shuts it. And she hears creaking and looks a little scared. And then Piper and Prue get there and notice that the door is locked. So Prue uses her power to open it, and Piper freezes Jeff when they see him in there. Phoebe, we see her in the other room backing up, and Madeline appears through the wall behind her. And she grabs the balloon from her purse, and he disappears back into the wall. He's huge. And Prue and Piper come in and ask if she's all right and if she got him. And she says, I think we're going to need a bigger balloon. And they all walk out, and Jeff unfreezes and just sees them leaving and looks very confused. I liked the pacing of that scene.
Yeah, I think it's put together really well. I think the shots are working. The acting's good, but it's, you know, for the most part, just pushing us to the next part of the plot. So I don't have too much to say character-wise here.
Agreed.
All right. So then we're back in the main part of the club, and the sisters are all together, and Phoebe's saying he's huge, he's ugly, and I really think we need a bigger balloon. And Piper says that maybe they came in too soon, and Prue says that maybe he saw the potion and like disappeared. So they talk about still needing to save the souls and defeat him, and that they know that Jeff will have to deliver him someone else. They decide that they need to watch Jeff, see who he grabs, then they freeze the room and they go from there. And Piper says, I wish we could just stick his head into the toilet and make him cough up the demon. And Phoebe's like, oh, honey, you're still upset with Leo? She's like, I'm talking about Carlton. And Phoebe's like, I can't keep up. And she walks away, and Prue follows after her, and then Piper goes in the opposite direction.
I loved that here because she's been on and off complaining about Leo, and Phoebe just can't tell anymore. I thought it was so perfect.
Yeah, I loved that. I thought it was really funny, really clever of the writers to kind of throw that line in.
Yeah. Aside from that, not too much. I like their plan, and I guess we'll see what happens.
Yep.
All right, so in the back room, Jeff is now in the room with Maslin, and Maslin's like, you brought witches to destroy me, and Jeff swears he didn't know, and Maslin tells him to get the potion from Phoebe and then bring the witches to him, and he tells Jeff that he has to get them by tempting them with an innocent soul. Again, more plot, I feel like.
Exactly. This is really just setting up. I mean, we see more of like Jeff's fear in this scene, but that's about it.
Yeah.
All right. So then we're outside of P3 and we see Jenny walking through the crowd. She's all dressed up, and you could tell like by her makeup and her hair and everything that she's trying to make herself look older. At the door, we also see that Barker is standing there and he's trying to get in with his date, but the bouncer is saying he's not on the list. Then he says, try looking for G under Grant, and pulls out a $50 bill. So the bouncer's like, oh yeah, Mr. Grant, and lets him in.
So, like, douchey.
I know. Also, like, $50? That's not a lot of money, but
I know, right?
1999.
I've been like, I'm good, thanks.
Should have been 100, but
Right?
that's just me. Then we're inside, and Dishwalla is announced, and they start playing. Jeff is in the crowd, and he's looking around, and we see Prue by the bar. She's also looking around. Then we see Piper, and she's watching Jeff, and Leo comes up behind her, and she's like, I wish you'd quit doing that. And he asks her what's happening. She tells him they're on it. They're just waiting for Jeff to do something. And Leo's kind of like, you think I like this? You think I like not being with you? She's like, I know what you have to do. I always have. The question is, what do you want? What do you want to do with me, with us? Do you ever think about that? He says, all the time. And she says, do you ever want to discuss it with me? And he's like, yes, it's just the timing always seems. And that's when they notice Darryl walking down the stairs. And she says, seems to suck. She tells him to hold his thought and runs over to Prue to tell her that Darryl arrived. And Prue then spots Barker and is like, oh boy. And then Piper asks what she's looking at. She's like, Darryl's over there. Like, what are you looking at? And they both walk away. Then we see that Jeff spots Phoebe, and he tells security that Phoebe has something illegal in her purse and to get it out of there. So two security guys walk over and start going through her purse, and they take the balloon and it spills all over her, like, I can't tell if it's like a skirt or pants or what it is.
It's like she's wearing pants and then has like a little skirt wrapped around her pants.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me too. So anyway, the green gooey like potion stuff spills all over her, and it's kind of like sizzly, and they're like, what is that? And she's just kind of like, that's a huge dry cleaning bill. And then we cut over to Jeff, who walks up to Jenny and says hello to her. He's like, I remember you. You're a friend of Piper Hallowell's, right? She's like, and Phoebe and Prue. We're like sisters. And he asks if she wants to meet the band, and she says she'd do anything to meet them, and they go together. Phoebe sees them, and that's when Darryl is moving through the crowd. Barker walks up to Piper and Prue, and he introduces himself and says, I'm going to be taking over everything from here on out. And Piper's like, wait, what? And that's when Darryl comes and joins the little group and tells Piper they have to talk. But Barker just keeps on saying things, and Phoebe runs up and tells them that Jenny's with Jeff and she lost the potion. Darryl tells Piper that it's important that he talk to her, and Barker tells him to get in line. And that's when Darryl kind of like pulls out his badge and he's like, why don't you get in line? And then Piper gets stressed, so she just freezes everyone. And then Phoebe points to where Jenny and Jeff are, and they all run that way, and things unfreeze. Then in the back room, we see Jeff push Jenny in and lock the door. Maslin appears, and Jenny screams.
So I love the chaos in this scene. It was so perfect, like the timing of everybody walking in and saying things at the same time, like everything happening. I thought it worked really well.
Yeah, it's a very organized chaos. I like the pacing again in this scene is really smooth. The way we're going from like Piper and Leo talking to Phoebe and the security to like everyone all in one group. Like it really was effective.
Yeah, no, they did such an amazing job with that, I think. And another thing, I noticed, I don't know if you noticed this, but the whole time they're talking and throughout that chaos, the theme song is playing in the background at the club.
Yeah, that's I because I always wondered where they got that theme song when they don't use the Smith song that is normally the theme song in the original version. I always wondered where they got the theme song that they use on the streaming services, and I realized it's from this episode.
Wait, what do you mean?
Like the original theme song isn't that one.
The da-na-na-na.
Yeah, no, that's only on streaming services because they don't have rights to the song that was when the show originally aired.
Wait, what was the original song?
It's like, I am the sun, I am the air, I am human, and I need. It's a Smith song. It's like I forget the name of it. I can send it to you.
Wait, how did I never ever know that?
Like if you watch it on DVD or if you watch it when it airs on TV, it's a different song. That's the theme song.
Oh my god, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. I don't know. I was really little.
Maybe
I
it's
just
just
feel
because in
that
all
was
your
back.
recent watches you've heard it with this theme, so you just like remember that being it. But if you watch the
Yeah,
show either on like TNT or if you watch it like on the DVDs, like it has the original theme song in it.
yeah,
Because
yeah. I
I
guess
did
I
watch
just
the last
didn't
two
realize.
seasons live while they were airing, so I remember watching them on TV.
Gotcha. Because I was like,
Yeah,
this
I mean
was.
the show went off in 2006. You were 2 years old when it ended. I was 10, so
I also was wondering how hard it must be because I mean, now that this is their club, like we can assume that we're going to be seeing more of it, throughout the show. And it's so packed in there. Like, how did they get that many people?
they're all extras.
Yeah, but that's so much. Like, I feel like that's a lot of money in the budget, to.
You usually don't pay extras, and if you do, it's very little.
Oh, you don't?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I never knew that. Because I always wondered that when I see like big crowds of people in shows and shit. I'm like, how do they like keep
Yeah,
track
at
or hold
most,
this?
an extra is going to be paid like $50 for the day. But a lot of times they don't even pay them. People just want it so that they have credits on their resume when they apply for acting jobs.
So now we see in the back room, Jeff pushes Jenny in the room and locks the door. And then Maslin appears and we see Jenny scream. And while this is going on, we see the sisters are running, following him back to the back room. And Prue stops Piper from opening the door because they don't have the potion. And Piper's like, but Jenny will die. We can't just stand here. And we see Jeff in the back. Jeff is in the room when the sisters open the door. And Prue uses her power from her eyes instead of her hands this time to throw him back into some boxes. And she says, help us. And Jeff says he'll kill him and burn him for eternity. And Piper says, listen up, Skidmark. You tell us how to save Jenny and get Elvis out of the building, or spending an eternity in hell is going to be the least of your worries. So hot, so badass with Piper. And then he says there's nothing that they can do, and Piper says they can break the pact and free him from Maslin. And he says if you go in there, he's going to swallow you whole and you'll still be alive. And Piper's like, well, that's not a bad idea. Prue says, what? And Piper has this plan for them to get eaten and for Prue to basically blow him up from the inside. And Phoebe's like, who's to say we don't lose our powers once we get in there? Maybe that's exactly what he wants. And Prue says they don't have a choice. The poison pill is gone, and Phoebe realizes that it's still on her clothes. Phoebe kicks the door open, so badass, and Maslin appears, and he says it's time to join your friends, witches. And we see in his stomach again, Jenny is inside now, screaming for help. Super gross looking effect. And then Prue uses her power to throw the top layer of Phoebe's skirt at him, and which has the potion on it. And then green smoke appears and he starts melting. And that's when Barker walks in and asks what's going on, and he gets hit with green goo as Maslin's melting and flies back to the floor as the demon explodes. And then the missing women appear in like a big huddle on the floor, and Darryl approaches and asks what's going on. The girls are helping all of the missing girls leave. And Prue's like, "You're arresting a kidnapper." And Phoebe says, "And rescuing his victims. Good job." And they walk out with the girls. And Prue says, "Trust me, that's all you want to know." And Darryl says, "I guess that's all I need to know." And he handcuffs Jeff. And then Prue kneels down next to Barker and says, "Mr. Barker, here's what you need to know. This place is ours. The ups, the downs, the good, and especially the bad. It's all ours. And if you ever bother us again, you won't have to ask if I'm threatening you." And he's scared and not very happy and like nods at her. So this is the scene I was talking about when I was saying I admired like the power of women really stood out to me in this episode because of this like whole scene. I felt like they were so badass and like they showed how strong they could be. I mean, seeing the three of them tower over Jeff while he's like not knowing what to do and they have it all under control, and the way like they're the ones that save them, give Darryl the credit, like, and then she goes over to Barker and is like you won't have to ask if I'm threatening you, like stay away from us and things like that. Just so powerful. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, and I think we see that it's not just like their physical strength and their magical powers that they have, it's like their personalities and who they are that's just so like badass and so like
Strong,
strong.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just so beautiful to see. Like I loved seeing that from them, especially Piper here. Like so new for Piper to be acting like that.
Yeah.
And then outside we see the band is still playing in the club and people are all dancing and the sisters are watching and they seem happier now. They're all happy.
Yep. So a nice little ending. P3 is a success and things should be going up from here business wise.
Yes.
Then we're in the manor and it's the next morning, and Piper is writing checks at the table to pay all the bills at P3. Phoebe and Prue come and join her, and Phoebe's like, "Thanks to Leo." "Well, technically, if it wasn't for him, you would have never landed Dishwalla." And she's like, "I suppose. And technically, if we hadn't vanquished a demon, your client, Chris Barker, wouldn't have abandoned his hostile takeover. The bank called and told me Mr. Barker didn't have the stomach for gruesome stage theatrics. He's withdrawing his offer." And Prue apologizes, and Phoebe says he was supposed to help them. They weren't expecting him to double cross them. And she tells them it's okay. She's like, "I mean, I understand why you didn't want to hurt my feelings, but you could have told me the truth." And they both apologize. And then Piper's saying that she's starting to realize that personal and business relationships don't mix well. That's when the bell ring and Piper goes to get it, and then Prue turns to Phoebe and is like, "Why were you trying to blame it all on me?" And Phoebe like makes a face at her.
This is a very cute little sister scene. Glad that everything's okay bills wise, and I think that she's kind of forgiven Leo for this whole situation, which seems better.
Yeah, it just kind of wraps up the B plot of the episode basically about what's going on at the club and that
With
they were
her.
hiding something from Piper and now they're all good.
Right. And now we are in the entryway, and Piper goes to open the door, and it's Leo. And he comes in and thanks her for everything. And she says, "Just doing my job," and invites him to come sit down, but he says he can't. And she tells him that Jenny is safe and Dan doesn't know that she was at the club. And Leo says he erased her memory about the demon, or according to him, made her pain go away. He said that he does that, but sometimes he can't, no matter how hard he tries. And he asked her if she meant what she said, and she's like, "When?" He says, "A couple of months ago when I almost died and you saved my life. I left and you said that you loved me." And she's like, "Well, I thought you were gone." And he says, "Well, sometimes I linger." And she smiles at him. And he says, "Did you mean it?" She's like, "Yeah, I meant it." He goes, "What about now?" And she says, "I still mean it." And he's like, "But?" And she's like, "But we can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing this. I feel like all I do is sit around and wait for you to show up. And then when you do, it's just not quite right." he says, I'm doing what I thought you wanted me to do, Piper. You're the one who didn't want me to clip my wings. She's like, and you shouldn't, not for me, but that doesn't make any of this easier for us. He says, what are we going to do? She's like, I don't know, Leo. And then the white lighter ringing noise happens when they're calling him. And she's like, go, it's okay, I understand. And they kiss. And Leo says, I'll see you. And he orbs out and she looks away, then at where he was. And it's like kind of sad.
This
So
scene
many ups and
broke my
downs with
heart.
them. I know, me too.
I still mean it. Like, that's my moment, you know? Like,
I feel like this is also very relatable where it's like there's a lot of moments where you feel like you're having, because we've seen this between them time and time again. It's like so relatable when you feel like you have the same conversation over and over again but never seem to come to any conclusion, like with your partner. Like I've been there so many times. I just know the struggle of that, you know?
yeah. And I mean, it's also really like hitting this idea that Piper and Leo, like, they have this kind of forbidden love, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are not seeing any major, like, things trying to stop them from being together. That might come up later. But, you know, he did mention in season 1 that, like, white lighters are not supposed to fall in love with witches. And so I think we're seeing more and more that something doesn't want them together. And I wonder how that'll continue to develop throughout the season and throughout the show.
Yeah, agreed. I can't wait to see how their situation develops. I mean, we've been seeing little moments like this between them all the time, and sometimes it ends more positively than others, but in the end we're left with this feeling of like, okay, but what is going to happen? Like, we don't know.
Yeah. My other question I have, when that like ringing noise happens, could Piper hear it or only Leo can?
I'm assuming only Leo can, because that would make sense. I figure she can tell because he always like seems to look up at them when it happens.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Because I was kind of like, I thought only Leo could hear it, but like she's like, oh, like go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's why I think she can tell, because like he always seems to make the same kind of like face, and like why else would he be looking up like that unless they were calling him, you know?
Yeah.
Right. So, I don't know, that's kind of what I assumed it was.
All right. So then we move to our final scene of the episode. We're outside and we see that Dan is at his mailbox getting his mail. And Piper steps out onto the porch and she looks at him and he looks over. She smiles and he smiles and waves. And she turns to go inside and then peeks back out and watches him as he goes in. So I think we get the idea that there is a crush going on here.
So, here's the thing that bothered me about that scene happening right now. You maybe maximum 15 seconds ago just had that conversation and kissed Leo. And you're like eyeing this guy 2 seconds later. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that was just so weird to me.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And like, I think the writers want us to like this, but I'm going to try to keep an open mind. But right now, with the way they're setting it up, where like she's still kind of in a relationship with Leo, but like likes Dan, like I don't love that premise.
No, me neither.
Because it also feels kind of like, you know, she can't be with Leo, so Dan's kind of like this backup safe option or something. And I
Mhm.
don't like that. I don't like using people.
No, I don't like that either. I also feel like if they're going to have Piper and Dan become something, they need to make the situation between Piper and Leo a bit more clear. Cuz I get it, you know, Piper is going through a really weird kind of situation where it's like, how is she supposed to know what to do, what's supposed to happen? But at the same time, like, you are kissing him and you are trying to work on things with him, and you guys, like, as far as we know, that's still where you guys are at. So to be showing this interest right away, like, it yeah, it does kind of bother me. But also, she could be kind of looking at it more like, maybe she doesn't realize that she's kind of using him. Like, you know how people, when they want something they can't, or I don't know how to explain this. Like when someone has certain qualities that you've been looking for. Like if you have a boyfriend who doesn't give you any attention and then this some guy comes along and starts giving you some attention. So you do feel a slight attraction to them because they're giving you what you've been missing kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get what you're saying.
Like maybe she kind of feels like that and doesn't realize that that's what's happening, but like Dan is cute, Dan is interested, and he is like geographically desirable, which is exactly what she's missing from Leo. Like in some
Yeah,
ways, Dan is everything he's not.
that's true. Yeah, I agree. I get what you're saying. Like I said, I'm going to try to keep an open mind and see where this goes. I just wish she had a more like concrete breakup with Leo before something new was starting.
I agree. I feel the exact same way. Like I didn't like that, especially like right when they just had that conversation, her and Leo. Like I wasn't a big fan of that.
Yeah, me
It
either.
was cute, but I'm still about my boy Leo.
Me too. I'm still on that team. We'll see if that shifts, but for now, that's where I'm standing.
Me too.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to reach out to us or follow us on social media, we're on Instagram and TikTok at rewitched_pod. You can also send us an email to rewitched.pod@gmail.com. And join us back next time for season 2, episode 5, She's a Man, Baby, a Man.